Our Plant Stories has been nominated as a finalist in the Independent Podcast Awards in a new category called Environment and Natural World. I'll let you know how we get on. Thanks to all those who are regular supporters of the podcast with their commitment to buying a monthly coffee. And to Anne, who also sent some caffeine my way this month, all of which goes towards paying for this podcast, the hosting platform and the editing programme. The link is in the show notes. And now, a plant story. Welcome to Our Plant Stories and something a little bit different. I'm taking a short summer break, but I wanted to leave you with a garden to wander around while I'm away. I think it's very special.
We are, as far as I'm aware, the only publicly accessible Victorian detached garden site left from what would have been, as I say, a very, very common site. But of course, they were always in the middle of towns and in the middle of cities, and at some point the value of the land just gets too tempting, or the demand on needing housing or more infrastructure, and it just means those sites then have been developed.
Matt Nolan is our guide as we walk around Hillclose Gardens in Warwick. Once a volunteer in the gardens, he is now the manager. It's a story of Victorian families, the Chadbands, the Sleeths, who had plots here in the 19th century, a community who saved the gardens from development in the 20th century, and a future with a fundraising campaign in the 21st century.
So the story begins in the 1840s, where a chap inherited what was just a field at the time, which was sandwiched in between the racecourse, which has been here since 1707, and then the medieval town centre of Warwick. And he inherited the land, which was about 5 acres, and saw the demand at that time for people who were living in the centre of Warwick, often in townhouses that had yards or workshops downstairs, but didn't have their own outdoor garden space. So he split the site into 32 individual gardens, so quite decent sized, 500, 600, 700 square metres per garden, and he rented them out to individuals in Warwick to have as their own private, fully hedged with a lockable door to come in and out of your own little garden, just a couple of 100 yards away from the centre of Warwick.
And who moved in? Who took on these gardens?
It was a mix, but typically when we look at the social history of the site, you will see all sorts of small entrepreneurs who were running businesses in Warwick, that were cabinet makers, pub landlords, chemists, solicitors, auctioneers, a real mix of sort of entrepreneurial Victorian society.
And we're standing in front of a summer house. It's just tucked into a corner. It's gorgeous with a tiled roof. The lead as well, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, lead tiled roof, brick built with its windows, and there's a fire in there as well.
Yeah.
So tell me about this one.
Yeah, so I mean the summer houses are an important sort of message for how much people used their gardens. They were using them all year round. So, as you mentioned, that one has a fireplace. So people would have, yes, of course, they would have been storing some things in them, whether it was tools or some of their fruit they'd been growing, for example. But they also would have been here all year round. They would have been spending all day here, maybe go to church Sunday morning and then come in the afternoon to do their work on their plots.
So when does this one date from? This is just gorgeous.
So probably 1880s-ish for this one. And these, along with the other 6 that we have on the site, were restored as part of that initial restoration of the site after its rescue in the mid-1990s to sort of early noughties.
So we have a tiny fireplace, a mantle with a mirror and a clock, then another kind of shelf, a few tools, a couple of chairs. Very simple,
yeah.
But you could definitely be out of the cold.
Yeah, very much, and you'll see we've got some other examples as well. They were all very individual. We've got one that's quite grand with a terrace as well, so I think it reflected, let's say, how much expendable income the different plot holders had and how much they wanted to invest in their plots. But certainly, people, as I say, would be spending quite a lot of time here, so it was just somewhere that they could take some shelter. If it was a bit cooler, pop the kettle on, make a cup of tea. So yeah.
It's a real step up from a shed, isn't it?
Yeah, this is not a tool shed, definitely. Yeah.
Were the plots numbered?
Yes, and what we've done is we've kept the original plot numbers. So
this is plot 19?
Yeah, so we're just moving into 19 now. And as I say, we had 32 originally. And then around about 1900, about half of the site was developed. So around the edges, really, we'll see as we walk around where those bites were taken out. But we now have the 16 plots that were left in the middle. So yeah, we're just moving into plot 19 now, and plot 19 is one of our collections gardens. So we've got two collections in here. We have our hardy chrysanthemum, which is part of a national plant collection shared with two other gardens. Took a bit of a beating this winter, unfortunately, so we're trying to rebuild the collection a little bit now. And then also we have, depends on who you ask, but somewhere between 130 to 160 varieties of snowdrop at Hill Close. So when many gardens are, let's say, rather quiet or closed in January, February, we are blessed to have a lot of people coming to visit to see our collection at that time.
And have they been planted since these were plots?
Yeah, so some of the volunteers that were rescuing the site originally were looking for relevant planting, and snowdrops were, as far as I understand it, a popular plant in Victorian times. So it was decided by that initial group of volunteers that they would build a collection here, and then over the years it's grown and grown and grown. And we do have some quite rare varieties here as well. There's a Warwickshire Gemini, for example, which is known from this site and is one that people come from many miles around to buy from us when we're selling some of our plants in that February time.
I love this because there's a board about plot 19 which is actually mounted onto a garden fork, which is gorgeous. But then I love the detail. So originally owned by Thomas Alsop Gill, an accountant who died in 1898. Quite a number of owners after him, including James Glover, architectural engineer, Mrs. Bray, Martin Ivans, auctioneer, the Lapworth family of Linen Street. And then 1933, it's bought by William Biddle, a well-known local greengrocer who had a shop on the Corn Market, 70 Marketplace. He erected a glass house on this plot, and after he died, it passed to James Smith, see also plot 16, who carried on the greengrocery business in the marketplace until the 1990s. I mean, I love that you have that historical record of who gardened here.
Yeah, and I think makes this site pretty unique. The detached garden was a once common sight across the UK, with lots of obviously old medieval or layouts of towns and cities where there perhaps was a lot of houses that didn't have space for recreational gardens. But of course, because they were all in the middle of towns and cities over the years, they get built on. So we're very fortunate to have what is now a pretty rare remaining example of these detached gardens. And that social history is, as you say, absolutely fascinating. You kind of get to see the Victorian, up until certainly the Second World War period, of what was going on in Warwick, what businesses there were, what people were, new startups and local skills that people had, if they were, cabinet makers or boot makers. And so, yeah, I think that aspect, people often think about coming to visit gardens, but the social history is certainly a very, very interesting reason to come and see the site as well.
And they might have been growing vegetables, but these are not allotments, are they?
No, they were. I don't think there was ever going to be a sort of standard use, because there's, if you think about 32 individual owners, they would have been doing all sorts of different things. But typically, if I'm introducing the gardens to people, we would say that they were probably a bit of a mix. So some ornamental, some productive, and some lawn. From people that know better than me say that it was more affordable to get lawn mowers from perhaps 1870 onwards, so maybe a bit more grass after that. But yeah, I think Some gardens, I'm sure, would have been immaculate, and some would have been perhaps the other end of the scale.
I think there was politics here, garden politics with...
I would imagine so. Definitely you would see some sort of status battles, because some of the plots were owned by, I would say fairly affluent individuals. They were auctioneers or solicitors, and then others, as I say, might have been a pub landlord. So it was there would have perhaps, I think, been a bit of upmanship on trying to outdo the next garden with what you were growing. And the top of the hill, where we're sort of moving towards now, would have had a longer growing season. So maybe if you had your plot up here, you would have been able to grow something a bit more exotic, or you would have had your longer growing season. So that it came with a little bit of exclusivity, I think, to be towards the top of the hill of that Warwick Town is plopped on.
It's funny because you've solved a kind of mystery for me, because last year we were in Sweden, and I trekked quite a long way because I wanted to see the allotment plots. And when I got there were summer houses. I mean, they were not sheds, they were summer houses. This guy had a piano in his summer house, and he slept in his summer house. And I got chatting to one of the guys who showed us around his summer house, and he said, yeah, but the idea came from you. You had allotments, that's where we got them from. And I was thinking, this is not what I think of as an allotment, but standing here, This is what I saw in Sweden. This is exactly in Stockholm, was small individual plots with summer houses, some vegetables, some flowers, some grass. So now it kind of makes sense. It didn't at the time.
Yeah, this idea certainly spread extensively across Europe anyway, and is still very popular now in places like Benelux countries or Germany, for example, where there are, it was very typical to build fairly large apartment buildings, and there wasn't perhaps the limits on space that there is in the UK, so they were also building a lot of these garden spaces. So even if you had an apartment, you still had your outdoor space to enjoy, as you say, as sometimes your own private plots as well.
The gardens are absolutely magical, Matt. I mean, they are so special, and they must hold so much kind of history of the families that gardened, and their children played, and they grew up, and then they handed it down, or somebody else bought it from them.
That's one of the things that attracted to me about the site. And it's, again, I mentioned my horticultural knowledge is limited, but I'm fascinated by social history, and I feel like I'm walking in the footsteps of all those lovely Victorians that were, battling to start their own businesses. I've been an entrepreneur myself in the past. You see, we've got one plot, for example, they had 18 children,
18,
3 apprentices and 2 servants, all living in the one house in the middle of Warwick, just on the town square. They had a workshop on the lower level, so he was a cabinet maker. So busy, hectic. You imagine a house that was just, it would have just been chaotic. So I often think about them when I'm walking through their plot. I imagine their plot might not have been the most well kept, but I have a feeling they maybe just came down here for 2 or 3 hours and just laid on the grass and stared at the sky and just enjoyed a little bit of peace and quiet before they went back to the chaos.
Was there a waiting list? I mean, was there a kind of, do we know?
I think in the Victorian times certainly there would have been, and that chap in the 1840s, Mr. Wilson, when he first split the site up into 32 gardens, he rented. That was his plan, was I want an income from my investment. So all he did was rent them out individually for about 20 years. And then another chap, Mr. Phillips, then bought the whole site in 1865. Actually, the auctioneers of the site were Margetts, who owned the plot that we're about to walk into in a few minutes. But he had a very different plan. He decided that he was going to try and sell them all individually as quick as possible and make a fast return on his investment. And that decision, thankfully, we are very grateful for now, because it created so many individual freeholders at the time that then it became very difficult later on to develop the site fully, and for someone to just buy the whole thing, that was very hard. So we saw, as I mentioned, in that 1900, 1910 time, houses that were built around the edge of the site, so we lost about 50% of the gardens then. But this middle bit was difficult. It was, they would have had to put services in before they built on it. Access was difficult because you would have to come in off the race course, which didn't have road access at the time. So we get to around 1950, and the local council decided they wanted to develop the site for social housing, so they started buying the plots one by one, but it took them 44 years to buy all the remaining plots, which gets us to the 1990s, which then has that wonderful group of local residents coming in who then were able to rescue and restore the gardens at that time. So that decision in the 1860s by Mr. Phillips to all of a sudden, within about 2 years, create something like 25 individual freeholders came to bear fruit later on in the 1990s, because it had taken so long for the council to buy them all, that by that point the residents were able to stop the development and get it restored, and we're lucky to have what we have today.
How big a battle was that with the residents, do you think, in the 1990s? Should we stroll on through this one?
I did know one or two of them, sadly not with us now, but and there's different levels of theatre about it depending on who you spoke to, but we're just actually in the area where the machinery came in to the site, so we're stood next to a metal railing where normally, if you look everywhere else on our site, all of the gardens have hedging around the edges. It was decided to keep this as a railing because this is a sort of a reminder of this is where they started to clear the site. The word spread very quickly around the local residents that machinery had been brought on site, and a group of them came down and, I don't want to say laid in front of the bulldozers, but a discussion was started about hopefully getting any development stopped at that point, to allow some time for the story to be given to the council about actually how historically important this site was. And once that case had been made, then the council stopped the development straight away, and then we were able to get listed status for both some of the summer houses and then shortly afterwards for the gardens themselves, which then put a full stop on being able to develop the site. But in reality, we would have been stood in and amongst housing if those local residents hadn't done what they'd done at that time. So we stand on their shoulders in terms of the efforts that they did. And then if we think just about the restoration, I mean, we're only 2.5 acres-ish now, but it's 16 individual gardens of 500, 600, 700 square metres each, with collections. The place was, the council had been buying some of the plots literally from 1950, and they'd just been sat going wild. Summer houses collapsing, roofs falling in. So they, apart from one plot, which has been gardened all the way through from the 1840s, pretty much all the others had been just falling apart and going wild. So it was an enormous effort to clear and restore the site to see, pretty much what we have today. We're in a plot at the moment that's got a couple of kind of interesting areas of planting. The border, if we sort of look across to our left on the site, is a Warwickshire sort of plot, if you like, which got the tree at the top is the Shakespeare apple, which is pretty rare. I think there's only 30 or 40 known trees left of the Shakespeare apple. There's a Wyken pippin apple. Wyken is an area just over the other side of Coventry. And then the tree at the bottom is a Warwickshire drooper plum, which is an absolute banger of a plum. It's great cooking or eating. So it's and then some of the planting as well in the border itself are sort of more local variety. So it's but that's very specialist knowledge. Again, the border to our right here, there's some very unusual plants, and it's one of our challenges is somehow that the knowledge isn't lost. Whether that's the social history or the horticulture here, it's you can lose one volunteer, and a huge part of that knowledge can just walk out the door at the same time. So that's resilience to be able to carry on all of that hard work and things is certainly one of our challenges. I'm hoping a skylark will do its loveliness for us. We've got quite a lot of skylarks that nest on the race course, and at times the prevailing wind brings that song towards as it comes across from the race course, and sometimes you get, there's 10 males absolutely going hell for leather. We also work with a local hedgehog charity, so we're a release site for rescued hogs as well, so ones that can't be taken back if it was a busy road where they were found, or then they bring them here. So we've had about probably 25-ish, something like that, released over the last 12 months or so on this site. Lots of hedgerows for them to be able to mooch around in, and we've got some feeding stations. We've not long had one put in that's got a camera in it as well, so we can see our hogs every night going in and having a bite to eat.
Oh, if I were a hedgehog, I would be so happy to be released here.
Yeah, there are probably worse places in the world to go, I think. And they can then, if they want to find their own territories, they can spread off down the sides of the race course and get to other woodland areas that are not too far away as well. So,
why would you move?
Yeah, but I'm interested. One of the chaps from the charity that released them here was saying often now actually sort of urban suburban areas are quite good for them. A lot of the rural areas now are perhaps not that suitable because the hedgerows are gone, the woodlands is gone, there are chemicals potentially on the site. So I'm very happy that we're able to help in a small way for a species that's had an awful time. The numbers are 60% down since the 1990s or something, so yeah, another little bit of work that Hill Close can do.
You do so many things. We'll return to the episode in a second, but can I just encourage you to follow, rate and review this podcast? The easiest way to do that is from your phone. Go to Apple Podcasts if you have an iPhone and Spotify if you're on Android. And let's see if the algorithms will do their magic and recommend it to other plant people. Meanwhile, back in the episode. So I love this. So we're going through a gate, basically. So this would have been delineating that you had moved into a different plot.
Yeah, and we're now...
Oh, every time you go into another plot, it's like just, being able to pop into another little show garden almost, you know what I mean? Another beautiful space, another beautiful garden.
Yeah, and this plot's been looked after by a lovely couple who have done it for about 8 or 9 years now. So in plots where volunteers have sort of made their mark, they just work with the head gardener and make sure that it's something that's, that would work in the soils and what have you, but then they're pretty much given the freedom to do what they want.
There's a tiny blackbird over there that has been kind of just you must have so many. Well, you have obviously so many birds.
We do. We also have a few local cats, which adds to the challenges sometimes for the birds. We've got. I was talking about the hedgehogs before, so we have our feeding station with the camera in.
Oh wow! So this is the hedgehog feeding station. Yeah. So can you literally see them going in and out at night?
I can.
Oh wow!
And my plan is to get this hopefully on the website, or so that we can share it.
Okay, so Matt, this is on your phone. So basically, you need TV when you've got hedgehogs to watch.
So I think, if I remember rightly, we had some hog activity during the night. So we're seeing them pretty much every night now that...
Okay, so this is footage on Matt's phone. You definitely have to get this on the website, don't you? It'd be fascinating. We'd all be just watching this.
This is what I would class as slow TV.
Yeah.
You watch a hedgehog bumble its little house, and then it kind of faffs around a little bit. Then it finds the bowl with the biscuits in. Very funny. We have one particular, I'm pretty sure, not that I'm making any assumptions, but it's likely to be a young male. There's a brick just to one side of the little bowl that has the food in, and he always climbs. Instead of walking round the brick, he climbs over the top of the brick because it's another 10 steps to get all the way around, obviously, and then just face plants into the bowl. And sometimes he obviously eats so much that he just passes out. He can be there for like half an hour, but he's not eating anything. He's just his belly's full, and then the sleep switch hits on, and that's it, and he's just there, upside down, face down in the bowl.
I love that you
See
kind
the
of get to
important
know
work
them.
we do here?
Very important work. Very, very important work.
Go back out.
How many gardeners do you have?
So in terms of the sort of staff, we have Neil, who's our head gardener, and then we have a rag trainee, Lou, and then Alison, who looks after our nursery. So both Lou and Alison are 1 day a week, and then Neil is full time. And then an enormous, wonderful group of probably somewhere between 40 and 50 garden volunteers, some of whom are just here, now and again, and then others who are here 20 hours a week. They maybe look after some of the collections that we've talked about, or they're working in the nursery. They're part of our watering team. We're stood in beautiful, warm sunshine now, but of course all of our plant sales that are in pots, and the nursery and the greenhouse needs watering sometimes 3 or 4 times a day when the weather is very warm. So yes, so like me, when I first came to Hill Close, I was a garden volunteer and a tour guide, but in my garden volunteering, because my horticultural knowledge is, let's just say, limited, I was part of the heavy labour crew. Lots of our volunteers are, fairly elderly or quite mature, so they're not able to perhaps do some of the physical work. So I was hedge cutter, compost turner, wheelbarrow pusher. That was a lot of my volunteering here.
How are you funded?
So it's a mix really. We're very blessed with the site that we have, that we are able to earn income through a variety of different activities. We have a lovely room as part of our visitor centre that we can rent out, so hire is really our most important income. People often are surprised that the admissions income from the gardens isn't more, but in reality it's third or fourth down the list in terms of how we are able to get the money to run the place. Grants and funding is hugely important. We have our tea room that we run on the weekends from April to October. We have a membership scheme, we have a little shop, we have a children and families team that do activities. It takes all of that and will take more to keep the place going forward.
So you're about to launch a campaign for what, 50,000?
Yes.
So why do you need 50,000?
So some of our responsibility with looking after the site now is coming to some fairly significant maintenance jobs. The site was restored 25, 30 years ago, so actually quite a lot of the buildings need some important work doing now. We have to for example, replace our heat pump in the visitor centre, which is just 12,500 alone, just to replace that. There's also more work that we want to do with the community, and unfortunately our income really just covers day-to-day costs rather than being able to do those much larger jobs. So the campaign started in April, and then across the next 12 months our aim is to try and achieve that £50,000.
So do you suspect there are some people in Warwick now who don't know that you exist?
There are lots of people in Warwick who don't even know that we exist, unfortunately. It's a very common thing. I'm working on the front desk welcoming visitors a lot of the time. I certainly hear it multiple times a week. I only lived, round the corner. I never even knew it was here. Of course, at times, maybe though, it's been the last 25 years or so where people might know it as a public gardens. Before that, they wouldn't have known it, maybe, or certainly during the time when the council were buying the plots, it would have just been almost a bit of a, not wasteland, but it was just rough ground, really. Would have been known by all the feral local kids. I would have definitely been here, clambering through dangerous summer houses and, absolutely, having war games in the basements and all of that sort of stuff. It would have been heavenly, I think, for young children in this area, but. It's so common that people don't know that we're here. So we're trying to build relationships with, the tourist office and other local businesses just to get us more on the map. But with our resources that we've got at the moment, really, us and the team, we've just focused on doing as good a job as we can do for the people that do come in, make sure they have as much of a lovely time as they possibly can, and then hopefully they come back with a friend next time, and that friend then comes back with a friend, and then their friend joins as a member, and then one of their friends hires the venue, and then so that's how I am sort of looking at it in terms of it's a bit of a long game, but we've done very well over the last 18 months really in significantly growing the footfall and the higher income, but unfortunately at the same time the escalating costs, it is a bit of a battle, but a very worthwhile one. So when people talk about purpose, well, our purpose is very clear. We need this place to be here for as many people as possible to enjoy and to support biodiversity in the area. It couldn't be clearer why we're here.
You're seriously passionate about this place, aren't you?
Well, hopefully, you having walked around and been here, you get a bit of a flavour for why it's such an important space. And people talk about a sense of place, don't they? And for me, Hill Close absolutely smacks of that as a sense of place. And it wasn't a big grand estate house with a huge garden, and these were just average Warwick folks who had a little bit of extra cash and wanted a little garden of their own, and do that over 170 years, and you end up with what we've got now.
I will put lots of photographs of Hill Close Gardens on our Plant Stories website, and I would urge you, if you live anywhere within striking distance of Warwick, do go and take a look.
I often say you can just tell when people are walking out of the site, their shoulders are just slightly lower than when they walked in, and for me that's priceless. It doesn't need explaining any more than that, really.
Our Plant Stories is an independent podcast presented and produced by me, Sally Flatman. Thank you for listening. If you want to show your support for this podcast via Buy Me a Coffee, then the link is in the show notes or on the website ourplantstories.com. I promise you, your virtual coffee will go towards the podcast, not plants.